Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Xabi Alonso has announced that he will be staying at Bayer Leverkusen for at least one more season, and that means that he will not be joining Liverpool when Jurgen Klopp leaves, and that's left something of a question around who Liverpool's next manager could be. So with Alonso out of the picture, we're going to be taking a look at some of the managers that could take that role, looking into details and trying to figure out what next for Liverpool. So Liverpool need to find a new manager, and with Xabi Alonso in the picture, that means that it allows some others to come into the frame. I've got three managers here today that we're going to be taking a look at that could be taking up the role of Liverpool coach. Now, when we think about what a Liverpool manager is, I think we think of some real standout features: high intensity attacking football, the ability to progress the ball forwards, and obviously an attractive style of play while also getting points. And the three managers that I've got here actually profile quite similarly. So we're going to be taking a look at some of the metrics and trying to figure out what's the best fit. Today I've got Ruben Amorim from Sporting Club de Portugal. I've got Julian Nagelsmann, who is currently managing Germany but recently did quite a good job, I thought, for Bayern Munich, and Roberto De Zerbi, who is currently applying his trade at Brighton and Hove Albion with one of the smallest budgets in the Premier League. So right, let's take a look. So we're going to start off with Amorim. Now, we're going to crunch the numbers on these guys because I think it's really important to find the correct fit for Liverpool. So he's 39 years old and his preferred formation is the 3-4-2-1. Now, this is similar to the way that Xabi Alonso wants to go forwards and the way he's applying his football at Leverkusen. And I think transitioning that into a similar way, I think you've almost got the same fit as Xabi Alonso. Admittedly, the football is a little bit different, and of course, they're applying their trade in different leagues. But Amorim's actually got a points per game of 2.25. Now that's not bad at all, but he's only managed for 219 games, and 202 of those are actually for Sporting. That being said, he did a sensational job to get Sporting their first trophy, or their first league title I should say, in 19 years. He's won 141 games at Sporting and only lost 31. That's really impressive. He's got a 70% win rate in his managerial career, only drawing 31 and losing 34. That's incredibly impressive, but the profile of the actual amount of games that he's done is limited in comparison to the other two managers that we're going to be looking at. But when we take a look at his Sporting side, I think it's really interesting in the sense that this season currently they're averaging 3 goals per game. They've actually managed to create a number of chances. They create 3.7 big chances per match. So really entertaining football, really free-flowing attacking football. Then you look at the ball possession. Similarly to the rest of the coaches that we're going to look at, 58.5% possession is very, very impressive. But you also need to take into consideration the league that they're currently applying their trade in. The Portuguese league, with how good the quality is, it's not necessarily the highest quality throughout the league. It's not the same depth as the Premier League or La Liga or leagues of that sort. So you need to take some of these metrics with a pinch of salt, and considering the fact that Ruben Amorim has only managed for Sporting, I think that's a little bit in the air of caution. That being said, he's a really interesting up-and-coming coach, and I think he is definitely one of the options that Liverpool should seriously consider. Up next, we've got Julian Nagelsmann. Now, I actually think that Julian Nagelsmann is a really interesting choice here. He's currently the Germany coach, but he's also accepted and said that he's willing to listen to offers on club level based around what his performances could be like later on, essentially leaving himself open to be able to take up a job after the Euros end, and I think that's really interesting. I think he was harshly treated at Bayern Munich, and he was definitely one of the most up-and-coming coaches when he moved from Leipzig to Munich. I just think that the step up and the expectation might have been a little bit too much from him at the time. Still only 36 years of age, 3 years younger than Amorim, and he's had 100 more games to be managing essentially, and I think that's a massive difference. Admittedly, his points per match is a bit different, but then you need to consider the difference in leagues, you need to consider the difference in performance. His win rate is 57%, lost 80 games, but of course a lot of these games were for Hoffenheim, a lot of these games were for Leipzig, and then when he got to Bayern Munich he only lost 10 matches. And if we take a look at that Bayern Munich team for a moment, I actually think some of the metrics around that are really, really impressive. So let's look at when he was really at his pomp. That's in the 2020-21, or the 21-22 season, I should say. And I actually think that he did quite a good job. So they won the league by 8 points. They scored 97 goals and only conceded 37. They gave them a goal difference of 60. And some of the metrics here on the right-hand side are really, really interesting. So they averaged 2.9 goals per game. That's nearly the same as Amorim is doing at the moment, obviously with 3, but in a different league. I'd argue the Bundesliga is a little bit more competitive than the Portuguese league. When you look at the big chances per game, 4.5. Now, naturally, Bayern Munich is a better team than most other sides, especially when you look at the finances and the profile of player, but it's still really impressive the level of performance he was able to get out of this Bayern Munich side. 64.8% possession, again, dominating matches, making sure they're able to go forwards, and they did play an attractive brand of football. So I actually think that Nagelsmann was given quite a rough end of the deal here. I don't think he's anywhere near the damaged goods that I think it's being naturally portrayed by Bayern Munich. And as you can see from Thomas Tuchel and his struggles in the Bundesliga, I actually think that the job that Nagelsmann done is actually quite underrated. And for me, I think he should definitely be in contention for this Liverpool position. He prefers to play the 4-2-3-1 formation, which would naturally fit into Liverpool's style. But we've also seen him experiment with other things. At Leipzig, he operated using the 4-2-2-2, and that utilised 2 strikers, 2 main outside wide wingers who would come inside, and then 2 centre defensive midfielders. I think he's got a lot of talent in him. He's young, he's fiery, and I think that giving him a little bit of a chance, taking a look at some of his metrics at Munich and further down the line, I think he'd be able to develop this Liverpool team into something quite frightening. So, an outside shout for me is Julian Nagelsmann. And finally, we've got Roberto De Zerbi, whose stock has dropped somewhat this season as Brighton manager. And to be honest with you, I think that's the Brighton squad catching up with him. I think they've played so many games, they've had quite a few injuries, and just the amount of games with the intensity that he's asking them to play at has just caught up with them. Some players just can't keep up with that level of intensity. He's managed for 383 games, and why am I bringing that up all the time? I think it's incredibly important to remember that experience counts for a lot, and when you're going into a job like Liverpool, you don't have time to find your feet. Not really. You need to start on the front foot. You need to start well. And one thing that I think all these 3 coaches have in common are a philosophy and a brand of football they can instill in a side really, really quickly. When we think about Brighton, they did that very, very fast. When we think about Nagelsmann, he translates the way that he wants his teams to play very quickly. But the more games you have, the more you have the ability to essentially iron out your style. He utilises the 4-2-3-1 formation, but I don't think he's going to have any problem in tinkering with it, in changing it if it needs to, depending on the profile of player that Liverpool have at the time. He has a much lower points per match ratio, but he's managed different sides. He's managed Shakhtar, who he managed to get a 2.1 points per match with, but Brighton, for the most part, he's had a points per match of 1.62. He did incredibly well with Sassuolo, I thought, even though he's got a points per match of 1.38. You've got to remember that 2 points per match is very, very high. And although Nagelsmann and Amorim are managing to do it, they do have different sides, and arguably better sides. And the most competitive league in the world, which I would argue is the Premier League, I think De Zerbi has gone above and beyond with this Brighton side. And we just need to take a look at some of the metrics that they had for last season. I want to look at last season mainly because I think that's when they were really at their best. Now, they finished 6th last season, which got them into the Europa League. Again, it's incredible. They scored 72 goals and only conceded 53. Now, I say only, even though it's 53, but that's Brighton. It's bright. I think we need to take that into context massively. They scored 1.9 goals per game, nearly 2 goals a match, and that's incredibly impressive when you think about the competitiveness of the league, when you think about how difficult it is to play through sides. They managed 60% possession. Again, in the Premier League, that's incredibly impressive. They managed to create a number of chances as well. They managed 3.1 big chances created per game. Again, when we think about the way that Liverpool want to set up, the way that they want to play, given a better profile of player and arguably a better standard of performer of player, I think Roberto De Zerbi will be able to get a lot more out of what he's given. again, I will reiterate, Brighton have one of the lowest budgets in the Premier League, and to be playing this brand of football, to be where they are in the Premier League, is incredibly impressive, and I put a lot of it down to the coaching talent of Roberto De Zerbi. So, out of these coaches, who would be the best fit? Well, there are other things to take into consideration, but for me, I think I'd actually say that Julian Nagelsmann is a really good shout. Now, I understand the problem that everyone had with him at Munich, but I think that the variety of clubs that he's managed at needs to be taken into consideration, and he's managed at several different levels. Hoffenheim is a different level to Leipzig. Leipzig is a different level to Munich, and already people are starting to say that Germany in the Euros might be a dark horse. Now, that is down to the way that Nagelsmann has been able to bring them together, the profiles and patterns of play that he's been able to instill on that Germany side. And this is something that Hansi Flick wasn't able to do. It's something that Jurgen Klopp wasn't able to do. So I think that he's got something about him. I really, really do. 394 games is more than Amorim, and in fact, when we look at it, it's actually more than De Zerbi, and he's 8 years younger. The preferred formation in 4-2-3-1 could be changed, but again, it might suit Liverpool that little bit more, especially when you consider the profile of the league that they're going into. You don't tend to see too many three at the back formations. Now, there might be a transcendence in the way that the game is played and the way that the game has moved on later on, but at the moment, I think that Julian Nagelsmann needs to be in serious contention. But my question to you guys is, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. We will be doing breakdowns on all of these managers and how they would set up Liverpool. But if there is one that you would like to see before everyone else, let me know your thoughts and who you would like to see in the comment section below. Which one would you like me to do a breakdown on first? Let me know. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.